Greetings, motherfuckers! Dances with White Chicks here. So, you already know I went on about Thanos in the last video, but it's time to talk about time travel. And I was debating on whether should I have time travel in the motherfucking title, because that's the spoiler, if time travel. But how the fuck do I tell motherfuckers that I'm going to be talking about time travel without having it? It's like shit. Regardless, there's shit that's gone unsaid about this, and people criticize the time travel for the wrong reasons. Believe me, it should be criticized, but not the way motherfuckers frame it as. So let's start. Okay, with that said, spoilers for Endgame and everything prior to it. Okay? We're discussing spoilers. How the fuck aren't we? I just said we are. Shit. Okay, so the time travel in Avengers Endgame is non-paradoxical. So that means, the second these motherfuckers go back in time, they can do whatever the fuck they want. Hey, you wanna kill your grandma? Do that shit. Fuck that motherfucker up. Punch the shit out of that motherfucker. You wanna go back in time and tell your 15-year-old self, hey motherfucker, invest in that Bitcoin bullshit so you're a fucking billionaire by the time it's 2017. Well, good for that motherfucker. That shit isn't going to help you. Okay, alright. I'm sure that 15-year-old version of yourself from an alternate motherfucking timeline is still not going to take your motherfucking advice because of being a fucking piece of shithead. But it wouldn't have mattered anyway. It's an alternate timeline. You helped the motherfucker out, but it doesn't have an effect on your timeline at all because you can't change it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's easy to follow. And that's the way it should be. That whole you can change what the fuck happened in the future bullshit when you go back in the past, it's bullshit. So, in itself, there's nothing wrong with Endgame having time travel where it's non-paradoxical and they can just go to these alternate timelines. Bam. But here's the thing. It makes the plan that the Avengers actually go through with in Endgame completely fucking stupid. So the Avengers, they need to get all 6 Infinity Stones. That's why they're going back in time. Well, hey, you already have plenty of moments you could just go back to. That would make it completely easy. Just fucking do it. Go back to this moment where Thor throws Stormbreaker in Thanos' chest. Now the motherfucker saying you should have gone for the head. Well, current timeline Thor, who's the fat motherfucker, he could show up, chop the fucker's head off right there before he snaps, and bam, take the Infinity Gauntlet.
You should have gone for it. What's good, Nyaka? Nani?
Or chop off his arm. They've already established that it's easy to do. Damn, you have all 6 Infinity Stones. No one had to die. If you motherfuckers say, oh, we don't want to take that risk. He's too powerful right there, we can fuck up. Okay, then go back to this point, where Star-Lord forgets that he's dealing with Thanos, an alien with super strength, and hitting him with a gun is pretty much the same as a bug bite. It doesn't do shit. Well, just step this motherfucker aside, knock the fucker out like War Machine did, backhand the fuck out of this bitch. Do what the fuck you have to do to this dumbass motherfucker, okay? Again, let fat motherfucking Thor come through, chop the fucker's arm off, bam, you have the Infinity Gauntlet. And you have 4 out of 6 Infinity Stones. You got the Power Stone, the Space Stone, you got the motherfucking Reality Stone, and you got the Soul Stone. And you know what? That means no one has to die, because you got the Soul Stone. Then, if you don't wanna go be unethical to get the Mind Stone and the Time Stone or whatever, just go back in time to where the motherfuckers were in 2012 in New York. Bam, you got the Scepter, you got the Ancient One, the motherfucker that looks like Ryan Shazier with the bald ass head. I mean, the hardest thing here is to convince this motherfucker to give up the Time Stone. That's the only thing you gotta worry about. That's it. But again, this is simple. It isn't hard to get these motherfucking stones. So with this, you have him. Best thing about this shit is you don't alert 2014 Thanos and get him to come to your timeline. So again, just like Thanos' depiction in Endgame, this time travel heist depends on characters being very motherfucking stupid. Really, there isn't much of a conflict here without the story going out of its way to try to make one. And on that note, I think that speaks to larger problems with the film. But I'm going even further. What if I told you that it's almost as if the time heist in Endgame nearly intentionally tries to fool you into believing there's conflict that isn't there? And to do that, the film purposely left out what specific time travel rules they were using until midway through the heist. Now hear me out, motherfuckers. The first scene in the film where the time travel rules gets discussed occurs at the 58-minute mark, right before they're about to test the time travel GPS and whether it actually works. So in this scene, they haven't actually tested this shit and are not completely sure what will happen if they are able to time travel. Well, after Ant-Man, being the dumbass he is, fucks up and completely wastes a vial of Pym particles, we get someone else to agree to a test run. And of course, it's midlife crisis Hawkeye. Many people point to this part of the scene with Rhodey and Lang bringing up the plot of Back to the Future and Banner shooting it down as explaining the rules of time travel in the film. Rhodey suggests killing Thanos as a baby so none of the events of Infinity War can happen. Banner, rightfully so, shoots this dumb shit down as stupid. I'm going to quote this motherfucker's words straight up. Think about it. If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
Nigga, what the fuck?
Okay, now that was purposely convoluted for the sake of comedy, but all he's saying is that from a time traveler's own motherfucking perspective, their future was to go back in time. This actually tells the audience way less than the film wants you to think it does, and I'll get to that in 40 seconds. But Banner's statement is perfectly fine. This has at least assured us that in the film they are not pulling some Looper bullshit, where Captain America punches his 2012 self in the face too hard and all of a sudden he'll get scars that magically appear on himself seconds later. I wonder what storytelling mastermind came up with that shit! I personally am not a fan of time travel that can change your own past because it logically makes no motherfucking sense. So I was glad they weren't going that route. But the questions remain. Although Banner was being used as the character to establish what they weren't doing, aka the changing the past bullshit, that still left room for either of the two main other time travel theories to be used. Banner did not at all establish whether the time travel would be creating different timelines, or simply if this was a time travel where there's only one timeline, but if you went to the past, you were always destined to go to the past, and you could only make the events that already happened in your timeline happen, and you were simply being in the past was already written in history to have happened. Alright, fuck, that was it. But either of those are still consistent with what Banner said. If you create different timelines when you go to the past, well, your future is going to the past of a different timeline. If you stay in the same timeline and you go to the past, your future is still now the past, but it is of your same timeline's past. So what Hulk says does not give any concrete rule about the time travel they are using in the film. It does not tell us what we as an audience need to know. It's a little forgivable here because this is before they actually test the time travel. But the time to distinguish between what time travel theories the film was using was during Hawkeye's test run, 30 seconds later. But that gives us no answer either. So Hawkeye ends up on his farm before his family gets turned to dust. He hears his motherfucking daughter speaking. He runs to her, and bam, the time travel GPS takes him back to the present. This is an absolute wasted opportunity. And this is one of the scenes that deserves the most criticism out of the entire film. Was this an alternate timeline? Based on later information midway through the film, we can say, yes, we know that their time travel creates different timelines then, but when you see this for the first time up to this point, is there anything prior that tells you that this was an alternate timeline? Is there anything in the scene that tells you that this was an alternate timeline? No, there's nothing here. Hawkeye showing up and disappearing right before anyone sees him is still something that could have actually happened in their own timeline already. In fact, the way Hawkeye ends up being forced to the present, where otherwise everyone else later in the film has to manually decide when to go back to the present, almost gives the audience the impression that if Hawkeye had actually reached his daughter before jumping back to the present, he would be creating problems and potential paradoxes. But this is not the case at all. This was a massive misfire. You could have easily shown right here that this was a different timeline. If Hawkeye goes into the house and his past self saw himself, he obviously does not remember seeing himself in this shitty outfit and his fucked up hairstyle, so he knows that he just went to a different timeline. But for the audience up to this point, still, both time travel theories in the film could be true. Even for the characters, they have no real way of knowing what time travel rules exist because, like morons, they didn't test for this. They just tested whether it worked in general. But regardless, Hawkeye gets out of that shit, comes back to the present, and says, "It worked." And I guess the characters all know, well, that's for certain, we know what we're talking about, it worked. But could somebody clarify whether it worked as in, oh, you're in a different timeline, or you're in the same one? But they still don't. And if you think this isn't a significant question, or something that needs to be answered here, consider this. The Avengers spent all this time after this scene to plan on getting the Infinity Stones. They tackle each of them one by one, like dumb motherfuckers. So during all this planning, the fact that characters such as Tony and Thor do not mention that they've encountered Thanos when he had either all the stones, or 4 of them at least, it only makes you think, okay, maybe they can't go back to those times, because if they did, it would create paradoxes. The omission of the obvious got me to assume, okay, so there's only one timeline, and they had to be careful about avoiding paradoxes. Or at least, that's what they think. That's the only way the heist can make sense for them to plan it that way. Because otherwise, you should have just done the methods I already outlined in the first 2 minutes of this motherfucking video. Motherfuckers, think about this shit. Think about this shit. Tony Stark is supposed to be a genius, okay? And he's genius enough to make a motherfucking time travel device. And if this motherfucker knew that it was a motherfucking different timeline he was creating when he went back in time, then the motherfucker should have gone to the easy place where he could have just got all motherfucking 6 motherfucking Infinity Stones motherfucking easily. Oh, fuck. Yes, this is some frustrating shit. Some frustrating shit. So this is a huge reason why going into it, I thought the heist was going to their own timelines past and not creating a different timeline where nothing would really matter. Because, I mean, think about this. The film wants you to think that there's stakes if they're seen or they're discovered or if there's paradoxes at play, but there aren't. It doesn't matter if their past selves see them because it's a different timeline. That timeline is gonna know that there's time travelers, but who gives a fuck? It doesn't matter. I mean, think about this. Banner is told to sneak around. Tony and Steve both try to prevent situations where they be noticed. You get the impression from this that they have to do everything they can to act in a way that was already feasible to already have happened in their own timeline. And that's what I assumed, until they show Thor's fat fucking ass. Okay, the scene in Asgard 2013 where high blood pressure Thor is crying and Rocket slaps the absolute shit out of him. That's the point where I saw this shit was going off the rails. I'm like, wait, Rocket, why are you okay with Thor talking with Jane when he clearly looks different and will alert her that he's from the future? Are you going to have him use some type of magic to disguise himself into looking like he did back during this time? And then, and then when Thor runs to his mother, I'm thinking, okay, this is trying to get us to worry that Thor is going to mess up history, right? And Rocket has to prevent it. I mean, the way that scene even just cuts away from it, it gets you to think, oh no, Thor is about to screw up history because he wants to talk to his mom. But then you start to say, something's not adding up. And then when they show Thanos, that's when you know, okay, they're creating a different timeline. Even then, you might think, okay, maybe they're pulling a twist where Thanos always knew that they would go back in time, and somehow he erased the memories of Nebula and Gamora. And then it's like, oh no, they're not doing that shit. Here's Captain America fighting his 2012 self. Okay, what the fuck? There is no logic behind this. Because now that it's a non-paradoxical time travel, there's no reason to be secretive. This shit is fucked. This entire heist is built on a different time travel theory than what the film is actually using. So it makes these actions fucking stupid. And you know, here's the only way. The only way you would think this would be forgivable. The only way they go with this scenario is if they don't know their time travel would be creating different timelines. That's the only way, if they don't know that themselves. But this isn't even the case. If this were true, Stark should be freaking out when Loki gets the motherfucking Tesseract and leaves. In fact, the entire scenario where he has Ant-Man give his 2012 self a mild cardiac dysrhythmia, and then Ant-Man kicks the case to current timeline Tony, and a motherfucking security guard, well, not security guard, but whatever, patrol motherfucker, whatever the fucker was dressed up as, alright? An officer, some type of guard. Fuck it. Well, anyway, he knows that he never lost the case. So this scenario is something that obviously didn't happen. And he's aware of that from before it goes haywire, and Ant-Man says that wasn't supposed to happen, and then Tony says, we blew it. What the fuck? You knew going in that you're creating a scenario that never happened. So this makes you the biggest fucking idiot ever, because you wasted everyone's time by not just going to Thanos when he had all 6 Infinity Stones and having fat motherfucking Thor chop off his head and then taking the gauntlet to your timeline, snap, motherfucker, do the shit, and then take it back. Whatever. Fuck it. Like, there's really not even a reason they have to be secretive about who they are. Like, if they just, everybody could just show up. Like, hey, we're from the fucking future. We need that shit. I know they wouldn't believe it. I know. But it wouldn't matter if you just went in there and took the shit. It doesn't matter. Just go up, show up, and take it. It doesn't, yeah, everyone in that timeline will wonder, what the hell was that shit? But if you just show up and steal the shit, it doesn't matter. There's no reason to be secretive. You're not trying to avoid any paradoxes because it's non-paradoxical. This bullshit just wants to create conflict when there isn't any. And you know what? Don't get me started about the Pym particle bullshit. The whole they all only have there's only conveniently enough for every single member of the Avengers team to go to the past and to use to come back. So they gotta be careful, right? They can't just carelessly go about this heist. It's high stakes, because if they run out of vials and don't have the motherfucking stones, they've lost and they can never do bullshit. Since it's a time travel that creates different timelines, you have an infinite number of motherfucking Pym particles you can get. These motherfuckers act like they never played a Bethesda game. You motherfuckers never had exploits? Motherfuckers never duplicated? Motherfucker, go back in time 3 seconds ago to get the Pym particles from your own motherfucking self. You only need one motherfucker to do this, alright? And take all their Pym particles besides 2. Now, if you're worried about that other motherfucking timeline, that other timeline can do the same exact thing and go back in time to when they had the motherfucking Pym particles. So every timeline that gets the Pym particles stolen from them can just steal it from another timeline, and then you got that going on for each. That's what you got to do. See, bam, you can keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I mean, you have an infinite number. If you continue this forever, you will never run out of Pym motherfucking particles. Okay? So there's no real conflict with the Pym particles. So again, the only way that would make sense is if it was a paradoxical time travel where you would have to be worried about creating paradoxes. Like then, if Hank in the timeline, Hank Pym lost some vials of Pym particles, but that really actually happened in the timeline. That's perfectly fine. It's fine if you have it where it's their timeline. And that's what they don't get. I don't understand why they didn't just go along with where it would be their own timeline. It pretty much solves all these issues. But the problem is they gotta have this crowd-pleasing shit where Captain America's fighting himself and Tony talking to his dad. That could still possibly happen. But especially with the 2014 Thanos and trying to pull him back into the present, right? That couldn't have happened if they didn't go with different timelines. Okay? So a motherfucking Thanos from a different timeline of 2014 went to the fucking future. You know what? That shit was so contrived too, because that's really the only conflict that the film has. And even that's contrived. And even that isn't fucking organic. Because Nebula not going and just leaving is the reason it happens. Like, if Nebula just leaves, there's no fucking final battle. I mean, this Nebula motherfucker. The second War Machine, War Machine had the right idea. Take your black ass to the future, bitch. Just take your black ass to the future. Who gives a fuck? This Nebula motherfucker. He knows. He knows. Bitch, who gives a fuck? Let that fucker know. He can't do shit. Take your blue cybernetic metal ass and go to the future. Everybody else is going to the same exact time, so they'll be there. I know motherfuckers are going to use the excuse, well, Thanos would have gone and captured Hawkeye after. Whoa, fucking shit. It didn't take motherfucking hours to get the Soul Stone. Those fuckers showed up to the planet, bam, that was it. All Hawkeye had to do was to go to the present, and bam, he's there. And then Thanos is left, 2014 Thanos is left with no way of ever getting to them. So it doesn't matter that they scanned their timeline Nebula. I mean, that timeline's pretty much fucked, because he knows all this shit. But, hey, oh well. But again, like all throughout the time travel shit, it is not an organic way to build up conflict. Like I said, the film has to go out of its way to try to make this time heist harder for the Avengers, for no reason. They're putting themselves in stupid scenarios where there's only one stone instead of all six. They're worried about pin particles when they don't have to. And motherfucking Nebula is being a dumbass that wants to trigger 2014 Thanos and get them to come to their timeline. This is so bad. And listen. This absolutely tries to fool the audience into thinking that these conflicts matter. Everything, all this conflict depends on you not thinking about it and not thinking of why the time travel paradox, let me rephrase that. The time travel being non-paradoxical makes all of this fucking stupid. And it's like if you give them the benefit of the doubt like I did and saying, oh, well, they wouldn't be doing this if it would be creating a different timeline. That doesn't make sense. So they have to be only in one timeline and they gotta be very careful. No. It's midway through the heist. Midway when you see Thanos and you see everything rolling in motion where you say, no, they're going on with a different time travel theory that doesn't make sense for this heist. And people, that's what people don't get when they criticize the time travel. It's not the fact that the time travel is non-paradoxical. That's not the problem. The problem is what they're doing doesn't make sense if they're using that time travel rule. And even the time travel rules the film says it's following, they don't follow it. So, for example, when you go back in time, you create a different timeline, okay? But when Captain America returns the stones, and I'm not even talking about him coming back. Listen, when Captain America returns the stones, well, he should be creating a different timeline where he returned the stones then. And then there's another timeline where none of them get the stones back. Well, then, if that's true and he can return it without creating a different timeline there, then he can go back in time to a different timeline without creating a different timeline. Does that make sense? Okay, but maybe I'm not being clear. But I'm saying if you could go to a different timeline's past and not create a different timeline when you enter that different timeline's past, then how the fuck can you go back to your own timeline without creating a different... you understand what I'm saying now? Oh, fuck it. Even the Russo brothers and the writers cannot agree on this. It's like they wrote part of the film under one theory and then just scrapped it later down but didn't change it. But the main thing is, this time travel, this is what the film is about, and it's absolutely busted from the foundation of it. This should not be what Avengers 4 is about. This is Avengers Endgame. And you got rid of Thanos to do this. You got rid of the great character, the absolutely compelling as fuck villain of Infinity War, to do this shit, which we know is stupid. Yeah, I guess it's cool to see 2012 again. Oh, it's cool to see Fat Thor in Asgard talk to his mom, and Tony talk to his dad, and look, it said Black Widow sacrificed herself. Who gives a shit when this scenario isn't satisfying? Like, okay, I'm going back to Infinity War. What motherfucking Doctor Strange said? There was only one way to beat Thanos. Pretty much. He saw over 14 million motherfucking futures, and this was the one the motherfucker saw where they won. Well, it's incredible. What were the other motherfucking 14 million motherfucking timelines he saw where they couldn't win from this bullshit? I mean, I want to see what the fuck happened in the timeline where Tony Stark was smart enough to say, "Oh, let's just kill Thanos when he's vulnerable with all 6 Infinity Stones." Bam! We take those Infinity Stones back to our timeline. We snap everyone back, and the timeline that we may branch off, well, those motherfuckers don't have a snap to deal with. See, we helped us and these other versions of ourselves too. It's easy. I want to see that fucking timeline. I want to. Did Doctor Strange not see that motherfucking future? And if he didn't, he's a dumbass. It's like, oh, you motherfuckers win doing this dumbass shit, but there's another timeline that you did it with less of the hassle that I just happened not to see. Fuck it, I'm done talking about this shit. But it was not. See. This was not satisfying. It's not satisfying, and again, they got rid of Thanos. The Thanos as we knew him from Infinity War for this. And that's why I'm not happy. Because it would be different if this was good enough to stand on its own. Right? And it was like, okay. But no. I don't even know. I'm probably gonna make a review that might be an hour and motherfucking 11 minutes. Shit, like, at this point, right, I was supposed to have a Captain Marvel review before Endgame actually, before it actually released, and I was still working on that motherfucker, but Endgame kind of pissed me off so much, right, I just had to say something. I'm sorry, and you can probably already figure out my opinion on it. Hell, look at my Twitter, you already know I wasn't happy with it. I'm sorry, and it has nothing to do with expectations. I would still watch this and say it was bullshit. Oh my goodness. How the fuck do you go from Infinity War to this shit? This is basically the Russo's brothers' Age of Ultron. I mean, it's not as shitty as Age of Ultron, but it's fucking close. It's close in my opinion. But whatever. I'll expect a review sometime in the distant future, right? I'm not gonna be able to finish that shit next week, but thanks for watching. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to keep in touch with more motherfucking content. But alright, take care!